Hi, we're joined today by Ognian Stoichkov, who is the Global Transfer Pricing Director at PepsiCo. Thank you so much for being here today.
Sure.
So you just spoke on a Bloomberg Tax panel about what's coming up ahead in international tax in 2019. And a huge debate around the world right now is about the digital economy. And countries are really trying to see a way for them to get profits from these companies under the digitalized economy. And I know that the OECD has 4 proposals out right now, including one that highlights marketing intangibles. So how does this whole debate affect PepsiCo, and what would be an advice that you have for companies that are kind of navigating through this right now?
The first proposal on user contribution approach, which is very narrowly focused on digital companies, probably doesn't affect much companies outside of that space. The second proposal, which is on the marketing intangibles ones, is a broader one, and obviously it's focused towards capturing companies who have marketing intangibles, who have brand names, and who have advertising spend in those countries. So that would be a proposal that would be concerned to most companies who derive, let's say, majority of their profits from such intangibles as the OECD defines them versus, let's say, technology intangibles. Obviously, my advice to the companies is to monitor that, to see how it happens. Again, there isn't much clarity where it's going right now. We expect to see more, potentially by middle of this year, and how it shapes. But yes, there may be an impact on PepsiCo if the countries go down that route and change the rules.
I know that you're an economist at heart.
Yes.
So what advice would you give to countries as they're looking to tax companies under the digital economy?
There is nothing stable in our world. It's dynamic. Some companies are going bankrupt, new companies are emerging, the economy is changing. So in such a dynamic rule, I would advise the OECD, even the countries, the 127 countries that are behind this initiative, when you're endorsing one or another proposal, think about what the effect on your country will be in the next 5 to 10 years, not just the immediate return, because the next year is a static year. So if a rule is enacted, maybe you get some effect, maybe even you get the desired effect, but then what's the guarantee that the operations of the company will not change reactive to that rule? So I would be very interested, if I were a representative of a country, to know how would that particular rule that I'm endorsing will affect my economy in the near to long term. And obviously, as a policy person, if I were a policy person, I would look to spur economic growth and develop my country. That would be my number one thing. Can I help my country grow and develop? And obviously the tax will follow growth and development.
I definitely think that's like kind of a difficulty sometimes, where yes, countries want to capture that revenue, but at the same time they have to keep in mind, well, you still want to encourage investment from companies, and you don't want anything detrimental to happen in the long term. So it does seem kind of like really rushed when you have 127 countries trying to come up with a solution. And I know that the OECD is supposed to come out, or they're expecting to come out with their 2020 review next year on the digital economy. So we'll have to see what's in it and how that's going to really impact companies then. So kind of moving the discussion along past the digital economy, there's a lot of other things happening in the international tax landscape. We've got country by country reporting, which were the first exchanges between the governments started last year. And then on top of that, there's a lot of major tax reforms happening around the world, and especially in the US. And then a whole host of other changes. So with all these things happening, how has that affected or impacted the tax department at PepsiCo, and how has that changed your job role?
I mean, I've seen my international tax colleagues working non-stop, around the clock. So also we've incurred more costs. I mean, we needed help from outside consultants because we didn't have the resources inside to do this. So it's become more costly, and it's become more visible. The tax function has become more visible within our company to the executives. There are updates to our CFO. We are with our tax reports in PepsiCo to the finance function to the CFO. So our head of tax updates the CFO regularly on the Pepsi issues, as well as on the development on the US tax side. And then I know that there are board updates as well. I know that that's happening in other companies as well. So tax has risen in its profile also internally within companies, as it's risen externally since 2008 to the non-tax environment, to politicians, to newspapers, to the general public in general.
How big of a role does tax play in making business decisions?
from a tax perspective, when we advise businesses on future investments, sometimes we can say, okay, there is a guarantee that if you invest there the next 10 years, the tax rate will be X, and that's your tax payments, which they input into the model to go to their net present value. And in PepsiCo, there is a certain return on capital that you need to meet, or otherwise it will not get approved. So to the extent that there is uncertainty and there is expectation that you may end up paying higher taxes than currently that country has in its laws, that may affect an investment. So it's from a country perspective, making sure you have more certain environment is really helpful to investments. Companies don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty it scares companies. Scares, like me as a shareholder. If I were to make a proposal, and then you're accountable to like your CFO will come back to you 5 years later and say, why didn't you deliver the promised return on capital? And if you plan to be in that company long term, then you may say, okay, maybe I will propose to go to that other country which is more stable. So tax has impact on business investments, and stability and certainty are major factors that businesses seek. Uncertainty is a negative factor for business investment.
Uncertainty is definitely a theme for the last several years in international tax, with from what's going on in countries, and then countries are kind of uncertain with what they're going to be doing and what they're going to be implementing in terms of tax, and then companies are uncertain because they don't have clear answers and guidance.
Yes.
So with all of that uncertainty in the landscape, how do you mitigate any worries that shareholders might have, or any onslaught of questions that the C-suite might have for you?
That's a very good question. What we did when BEPS came out, we actually did a very deep analysis of our operations to see what our potential risks are from actions 8 to 10, quantify them and mitigate them. From a transfer pricing perspective, we try to stay on top on every new development, to understand that development will raise our tax liability, to try to address it properly. No other choice. Any other company will do the same thing.
So it seems like there's a lot to think about and a lot of waiting for more answers. And it definitely seems like a really good time to be involved in the tax world.
It's a very hot spot to be right now. So in the horizon, my advice is expect increased workload for tax departments. In the transfer pricing space, definitely. Companies are building their transfer pricing teams right now. If you look at what other peer companies are doing, they are hiring people, they're preparing, they're working inside. Just for us to comply with the rules, it's almost like a full-time job.
But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
To be here.